I have with me Mr. Marandi from Iran. He's an advisor on nuclear issues and is up to date on the latest developments concerning Iran's negotiations with the Western powers on lifting sanctions and on the broader nuclear arrangement going forward. Mr. Marandi, thank you for your time. My first question to you. What is the latest development concerning Iran's nuclear status?
Iran and the P4 plus one, which means Russia, China, Britain, France, and Germany, have been negotiating for 9-10 months now to finalize a deal to re-implement the 2015 nuclear deal. And of course, the Americans have been nearby, close to the negotiating table, consulting with their European allies. A lot has been accomplished over the last 8-9 months, and what the remaining differences are over a number of words, basically. The Americans and the Europeans want to keep those words ambiguous, and the Iranians want an airtight deal, because the Iranians have a very bad experience over the 2015 nuclear deal, where the Americans and the Europeans basically cheated them, and then the Americans left the deal. So right now the issue is over a few words, where we have to come to some sort of agreement which is acceptable to Iran.
Now, the words aside, are there other obstacles in terms of opposition from any quarter?
Well, there is another issue, and that is the International Atomic Energy Agency probe. That probe is based on false accusations that have been put forward by the Israeli regime. Now, the Israeli regime is not a member of the NPT. It has nuclear weapons, and it also falsifies all sorts of information. The Iranians have been cooperating with the IAEA, but the Iranians are saying that if they want a deal, they have to ultimately close this file, because the Iranians are saying that the Americans want to keep the file open, just like they want to keep ambiguities in the deal, so that later on they could use it to put pressure on Iran. So the Iranians are saying, if you want a strong foundation for a deal, we have to solve all the issues so that we can go forward without being concerned about the deal falling apart. And especially since this probe is about issues that date back over 2 decades ago, when the Iranian nuclear program, the Iranian peaceful nuclear program, was in its infancy, it's obviously not a big issue. We know that, for example, the South Koreans, they were actually working on highly enriched uranium, but that probe was closed very rapidly because South Korea has close relations with the United States.
So, going forward, are there any, do you expect, given that President Biden is facing rather troubling election prospects going forward, do you really expect a breakthrough this year?
It's difficult to say. The United States is facing a lot of turmoil. It's been like that since 2016. And some say that Biden is waiting for the November midterm elections before coming on board for a deal. The Iranians are ready. If the ambiguities are resolved, and if the IAEA probe is resolved in a meaningful way to the satisfaction of both sides, the Iranians have no problem speaking with technical experts at the IAEA. The problem is that the Board of Governors is a political entity, and the head of the IAEA is in the American camp. We know from WikiLeaks documents that the previous head, in order to get elected, he told the Americans that I will be firmly in your camp. So if politicization is set aside, then the issue at the board can, if it's resolved and the text is resolved, the Iranians are ready for a deal. A deal could be signed within days.
So you're here at the SCO. Do you expect maybe some consultations here on that score? Is some help of some kind possible?
I think the membership of Iran at the SCO is more about the changing world. The nuclear negotiations are not as important for Iran as its place in this rapidly evolving world. Iran has the second largest gas reserves in the world, the fourth largest oil reserves in the world, and much of the world's gas is actually either in Iran or in neighboring countries like Russia and Turkmenistan. So Iran, with a large population and a huge influence in its region, feels that its future is in Asia more than anything else. As Asia rises, it becomes increasingly important for Iran. And as Europe and the United States are on the relative decline, regardless of what sort of relationship Iran has with the Europeans and the Americans, I think the future is in Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and West Asia for Iran more than anywhere else.
A word about India and how it's played its cards vis-a-vis your nuclear program. What do you expect from India at this point?
Well, one very interesting fact is that due to the war in Ukraine, a lot has changed. So the Russians now need Iran for trade more than ever before. And the Russians are very keen on developing a north-south corridor, which would link Russia to the Persian Gulf through Iran, and of course, which would give Iran access to Russia and Europe, and Eastern Europe. So that I think is very significant for India because India has a very important relationship with Iran, but also Russia, but also Central Asian countries, as we've seen during this event, because of the problems that exist now between Russia and Europe, they have to do increasingly large amounts of trade through Iran. And that is also important for India. So a transit corridor is also going through Central Asia, Asian countries to Iran. And that is something that the Indians can benefit from. So it's not only trade between Iran and India and investment and energy, but it's also linking India to Central Asia and Russia as well.
Mm-hmm. So let me try and get this straight. India's role in the Iranian nuclear imbroglio, is it, does it still annoy, irritate Iran? You expect some kind of a better kind of an attitude?
I think Iran's problem with regards to the nuclear program is the United States. The Europeans want a deal. They would sign a deal today if it was up to them. The Russians and the Chinese are on board. And the global south doesn't have a problem at all, and that includes India. So the real issue is whether the United States is prepared to sign a deal which is fair to Iran. And at the Americans have been dragging their feet for months at the negotiating table because the Iranians have said, we have to make sure that the nuclear deal this time round is secure, unlike in 2015. We have to make sure that we get the full benefits from the deal, unlike in 2015. And it's very difficult for the Americans who believe in their own exceptionalism to come to terms with that reality. But as the world changes, it becomes increasingly hard for the Americans to impose their will on anyone, really.
So now that Iran, this is my last question, and now that Iran is entering the SCO, what are your expectations?
Well, I think the SCO is an excellent platform, both for multilateralism, but also bilateral discussions. So this is a platform for all sorts of exchanges and ideas and moves for development. So the SCO as a collective is important because they can work on regional security, terrorism, organized crime, the drug trade, business, trade, and development. But also, I think it is very important for bilateral relations as well, because on the sidelines of this organization, the key countries of Asia speak about their future relationships.
Mr. Marandi, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
It's an honor. Thank you very much.